What is up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And as always, we have ourselves a jam-packed show as we have a lot of volleyball to get into, such as the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament. Which teams are amongst the remaining in the Sweet 16, and which teams are taking the second flight home back to the off-season. Also, the AVP just wrapped up its season as we had a thrilling Central Florida Open tournament to close out the AVP season. Also, we have some other NCAA women's volleyball news that needs to be discussed as we have some transfers and we have a coaching change to a prominent program. So you already know what the deal is. Hand me a volleyball. Set up the net. Because I'm about to serve you up some volleyball action here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in on this beautiful Monday afternoon, Monday evening. Either way, you are found yourself into episode 171 of Set Point. Without any further delay, let us begin. But first and foremost, Set Point would not be where it's at without IE Sports Radio providing the platform to go live on Spreaker. You can follow IE Sports Radio on several different social media platforms such as Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok at IE Sports Radio. Also, you can follow IE Sports Radio on Facebook by typing in the word IE, then sports, then radio in the search bar. Also, we have a website, www.iesportsradio.com, and when you go there, you'll see a Patreon link at the top, which starts at $5 a month. This will get you a shout from all of our amazing shows, including this one, and higher tiers include IE Sports Radio merchandise, access to IESRU, the podcasting university of IE Sports Radio, and even a chance to be featured on a segment of our flagship show, The Defining Moment with Larry B. Because for the past 8 years and counting, IE Sports Radio has been bringing you amazing content ranging from interviewing legendary athletes, coaches, and other authorized media personnel to building tailor-made shows dedicated to all major sports cities around the country. All the while, we've been continuing to be by the fans and for the fans, and with your help, we are ready to take the next biggest step. Thank you to everyone for all of your support and for making IE Sports Radio your direct feed for all that sports. Also, the holidays are vastly approaching. IE Sports Radio has some Christmas ornaments, some IE Sports Radio Christmas ornaments for you to buy, made by Angela Winstead, one of our very own IE Sports Radio members. And also a shout to our Patreon supporters, Bay Area Raised Apparel, Marcus Losgreat, Key to the Gate, and a donor that wishes to remain anonymous. Without any further delay, let's get on into that volleyball action. First, we got to say hello to the chat room. Larry B, he says, great tournament so far. I imagine he's referring to the NCAA tournament, just because we had more than one tournament. And we also had the NIVC, but I'm sure he's referring to the NCAA tournament. Karnick pops in the Spreaker chat room. He says, hello, Teran. He just wrapped up with Chi-Town Weekly. And Mike Pat says, and here's the man who tried to bring down the mood of the DMV last night, Mike Pat. So Mike Pat, unfortunately, is referring to all the DMV teams, Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia teams that lost in the NCAA tournament. I'll be getting into that in a little bit, but we have to get into some AVP action. So yes, the NCAA tournament wasn't the only thing that was happening over the weekend, just because I cover all things volleyball, and the AVP had their final tournament of the season, which I can't believe the AVP season flew by very quickly. So this took place in Florida, as this was the Central Central Florida Open tournament, as this was part of the Pro Series. So on the men's side of things, we're just going to skip over to the Final Four, just because if I go through the entire tournament, y'all are going to get put to sleep. So the Final Four the Final Four pairs, or the semifinals, consisted of Timothy Brewster and Kyle Friend versus Tri Bourne and his partner, John Hayden. The other semifinal was Dave Palm and Roberto Rodriguez taking on Taylor Crabb and Phil Dalhausser. I guess I should also mention that the number 1 seed fell in the first round, and that was Theo Brunner and Kame Schulk, which that was very surprising. They lost in the first round, which I don't think anyone had on their bingo card. They lost to Caleb Queckel and Dylan Zaka. I don't know how they were able to lose that, but they lost that one in 3. So, yeah, the AVP does have... Sometimes the AVP is like that sometimes. So, in the semifinals, we had John Hayden and Tri Bourne outlasting Timothy Brewster and Kyle Friend. Bourne and Hayden were actually the number 3 overall seed, while Brewster and Friend were the number 5 overall seed. Bourne and Hayden won the match 24-26, 25-21, and 15-12, while the other semifinal saw the number 2 seed Phil Dalhausser and Taylor Crabb sweeping away Dave Palm and Roberto Rodriguez 21-19 and 21-16. And then the final, we had John Hayden and Tri Bourne, the number 3 overall seed, taking on the number 2 overall seed Phil Dalhausser and Taylor Crabb, as Crabb and Dalhausser narrowly won in 2 sets, as they won the first set 21-18, and they won the second set 21-19. I imagine the freeze rule was in play in terms of clinching the match. And what the freeze rule is basically you have to win on side-out scoring. You can't just have your opponent serve and then just crush down a kill and then you win that way. But I'm not entirely certain when it comes to the Pro Series. Like, the AVP sometimes has that rule, but it sometimes doesn't. So in this case, that might have been the case, but I'm not entirely certain. I just checked the website, and then it said in the freeze, which every now and then that meant you got to score on side-out scoring. It's a good way to win a match, just so you don't lose via a serve that unfortunately goes out or unfortunately gets passed very well for an easy kill. So basically, going back to the whole recap of the final, Taylor Crabb and Phil Dalhausser, that's basically a pair that is absolutely unfair for the opposing teams. And I am not surprised Taylor Crabb and Phil Dalhausser won, just because Phil Dalhausser is an AVP legend. He's a beach volleyball legend altogether, and Taylor Crabb is probably going to be an AVP award winner in terms of the post-season awards. I'll get into that a little bit later, but for right now, Phil Dalhausser and Taylor Crabb they dominated this tournament. And what I mean by they dominated this tournament is that they actually did not lose one set throughout any part of the tournament, which makes it an even more impressive feat. And it's just quite amazing that they were able to do so. They did run into a little bit of trouble in the finals, but you also have to acknowledge that Tri Bourne is also amongst one of the top players, and he meshed well with his partner, John Hayden. And unfortunately, it wasn't enough, but the fact that Hayden and Bourne were able to mesh well with one another in this tournament speaks to high volumes of how they deserve to be in the final. And for the most part, I really thought that they played well together. They even had to dig their way out of the contenders bracket, which the contenders bracket means that you basically lose in the main bracket, but then you have to win your way up through the contenders bracket. And then if you win your way through the contenders bracket, then you advance to the semifinal. So it's basically not one and done, but basically two and done up until the semifinals, which I kind of like. So that's basically that on the men's side of things. It really was a strong end to the season. Normally, Phil Dalhausser is partnered with quite a bit, and Taylor Crabb's primary partner is Taylor Sander. But I guess he decided to switch things up a bit just because Sander wasn't anywhere featured in this tournament. So unfortunately, we didn't see the Team Taylor just take down another pair like they have been doing in the past tournaments. So that's it for the men's side of things. And on the women's side of things, this one was a little bit more interesting, if you ask me. So for the semifinals, we had Gina Yarongo, which everyone knows all too well about, and Emily Capers. So I imagine Julia Scholes, I guess, was taking a little bit of time off from the AVP tournament. And I think she was also participating in international tournaments, but I'll be getting to that a little bit later. I can't confirm that, honestly, but I've seen Gina Urango with some different partners, but Gina Urango was the number 1 seed along with Emily Capers in this tournament. Their opponent in the semifinals was Katie Dickens and Carly Skojit. The other semifinal consisted of Megan Rice and Carly Wopat. By the way, this isn't the Megan Rice that played at LMU. This is a different Megan Rice. As Rice and Wopat took on Carly Can and Jennifer Ketty. As in the first semifinal, it was quite the dandy, if you ask me, as Capers and Urango won that one in a thriller in 3 sets. They won the first set 25-23. Dickens and Skojit won the second set 21-17. And then in the third set, Capers and Urango won that set 15-12, which advanced them to the final. By the way, Capers and Urango were the number 1 overall seed, which I kind of understand just because there was no Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng, and there wasn't Sarah Sponsel and Therese Cannon. Well, not I guess, there wasn't Therese Cannon and Sarah Sponsel. So that's the first semifinal right there. The other semifinal consisted of Carly Can and Jennifer Ketty sweeping Megan Rice and Carly Wopat. Wopat and Rice actually were the 12th seed. They actually upset, I think it was Emily Day and Haley Harward in the contenders bracket final, which got them into said semifinals. So again, basically the 2-1, how am I going to describe this? The contenders bracket rule is something that is definitely beneficial to all pairs. So you can lose once, but you can't lose twice. Up until the semifinals, of course. Then once the semifinals is reached, then you basically are, if you lose, you're out, but if you win, you advance. So Carly Can and Jennifer Ketty were actually the 6th seed, so that's quite the astounding feat that they were able to win their way through the tournament up into the finals. And by the time the finals happened, Can and Ketty were actually the pair that did not drop a set throughout the entire tournament, or they only dropped 1 set throughout the entire tournament. But they were taking on the number 1 seed in Gina Urango and Emily Capers, as in the first set, Ketty and Can controlled most of the set for the most part and won the first set 21-17. Then the second set, it was tight most of the way, but Urango and Capers obviously pulled it out. They won it 21-19. Again, it was a tight set, but Urango and Capers were able to just squeak out that second set win. Then the third set, Ketty and Can were able to control a majority of the momentum as they won that they won the third set 15-11 as they wound up winning the Central Florida Open as they upset the number 1 seed Emily Capers and Gina Urango, which was quite astounding. I am very impressed that they were able to do so, just because beating a number 1 seed is not easy, especially since we haven't really seen these two on the big stage of the finals. But they were able to do so, and they were able to stand on top of the ladder, which is quite astounding. So good job to Carly Can and Jennifer Ketty, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the AVP season in a nutshell. I can't believe it's over already. I find it hard to believe that this season went by so quickly, despite there being a lot of tournaments this season. Like, there were so many tournaments. It wasn't just 3 tournaments. It was probably 4 or 5 times the amount, if not 6 times the amount. So either way, we got lots of cities involved, such as Chicago, Atlanta, Florida, California, obviously, with the Huntington Beach Open and the Manhattan Beach Open. But either way, that is pretty much that for the entire AVP season. So now we got to get into the postseason awards. So the postseason awards basically there's an MVP for the men and the women, and they have certain categories. They have a men's most valuable player, or a men's MVP, a women's MVP, a men's rookie of the year, a women's rookie of the year. Then there's also the men's best defender award and the women's best defender award. And then there's the offensive and defensive player of the year. Then there's pair of the year on both sides. You get the point. So there are 10 awards, and I actually decided to make predictions for this. I'm terrible at making predictions. As most of you already know, I failed to even predict the finals champion of the women's side of things of the AVP Phoenix Championship. Though I did get the men's right with Taylor Sander and Taylor Crabb winning, but I basically made my predictions on Bally Sports, on the Bally Sports website to basically, make my picks. So my predictions are, for men's most valuable player award, I picked Taylor Crabb just because, well, he's been the most dominant. He leads the AVP in kills on the men's side, and overall, I just think he's just a beast. There's just no other way to say it. And then I also picked Kelly Cheng for most valuable player award, basically for the same reason. She leads the AVP on the women's side in kills and service aces, which is darn right impressive. And then for men's rookie of the year, I picked Taylor Sander just because Taylor Sander has just been outstanding. He's played a whole lot of indoor, but now he's adapted really well to the beach side of things. And it's not easy just because beach volleyball and indoor volleyball are completely different, not just because of outdoors and indoors, but because there's sand on the court and there's sometimes wind plays a factor sometimes, and sometimes it's just 2 players as opposed to playing with 6 players. So there's that little thing right there. Then for the women's rookie of the year, I picked Julia Scholes. And by the way, there were a certain number of options. Like for the rookie of the year, there were 3 options. I don't remember the other 2 for the men's side, but I remember on the women's side, it was Haley Harward and Megan Kraft as the other 2 nominees. But I picked Julia Scholes just because she passed really well, and she had quite a number of digs, and she also was dominant in terms of kills. She was mainly Gina Yarongo's partner for the most part. So I really thought Julia Scholes really adapted well, and she was not intimidated. And this is a girl that has been through a lot, and she had to go through a lot in terms of her NCAA volleyball career, and obviously battling mental health issues and whatnot. But I picked her just because she made a big splash when it came to the AVP scene. And as for the AVP's Best Defender Award, I picked Taylor Crabb for this one as well. Okay, I'm just going to say this right now. Taylor Crabb dominated a majority of these categories. It's like he was good in passing. I think he had the best passer rate in terms of digging the ball. And then he was, and he was like top 10 in digs in terms of the AVP. So I basically based the Best Defender off of like passing percentage and then digs. I don't know if Taylor Crabb is going to sweep these awards, but he was the most dominant in terms of single player stats. And then for AVP Women's Best Defender Award, I picked Sara Sponsel for this one just because her passer rating in terms of digging the ball is a perfect 100%. It's quite astounding if you ask me, and I really think she definitely has a shot at that. Now, obviously, you also have to factor in other players who block the ball well and, who dig the ball well. But I'm going to go on a limb and say Sara Sponsel gets this award just because passing the ball is so important. Just because you sometimes have the ball getting blasted at you from about like maybe 50 or so miles per hour. So I gave this award. I'm predicting Sara Sponsel gets this award. Knowing my luck, it's probably going to be someone else, and it's probably going to be Betsy Flint, knowing my luck. And then for Offensive Player of the Year, I picked Taylor Crabb for this one. Just because, just like the MVP award, Taylor Crabb just dominated in most of the offensive stats. I want to say he was also top 5 in service aces, which is also crucial right there. Like, serving and passing are basically staples in the volleyball world, regardless of whether it's indoor or whether it's beach. And the same thing for Offensive Player of the Year. I picked Kelly Cheng for that one as well, just because she led the AVP on the women's side in service, aces, and kills. So it's tough to really argue her being Offensive Player of the Year. I'm certain she'll get that, but I don't know if she'll get MVP as well. I mean, I don't know the past AVP awards, just because I'm not really too big on giving out like big time awards, on announcing big-time awards, but that's just me. And then for Team of the Year on the men's side, I definitely gave this one to Taylor Crabb and Taylor Sander. That's because they were the dominant pair. This was the first time the two had partnered with one another for the most part, and they wound up meshing well with one another. I really thought they were just dynamic with one another. And keep in mind, Taylor Sander had not played beach volleyball in the AVP until this season. And I really thought that, once again, he meshed well with Taylor Crabb, who is a veteran when it comes to the AVP. So overall, I really think that those two I'm picking as men's team of the year. And then for the women's team of the year, or the duo of the year, I picked Teran Rodriguez and Kristen Nuss. Now here's the deal. The reason I picked those two was because they had won, I think it was 3 or 4 AVP tournaments, and if not, they got to the finals in one of them. And in order for them to have made the Phoenix Championships, which is basically the AVP Super Bowl, they needed to win the final tournament, which was the Chicago Open. They were able to do so, and they were able to barely get into the AVP tournament as an automatic qualifier. And eventually they wound up winning the Phoenix Championships, which really speaks to high volumes of how much this team meshed well with one another. Keep in mind, this is a pair only in their second year, and they've obviously had success with one another at LSU, but now they're having success in the AVP. And that's why I gave them, or I'm picking them as my pair of the year. I'm not trying to shun out the other pairs that have definitely earned this title, but I really think that those two are the pair of the year, just because those two have worked really hard, and it's so easy to basically pick probably Sara Hughes and Kelly Kalinsky, but I think giving it to Teran Rodriguez and Kristen Nuss really speaks to high volumes of how much they've grown, let alone how much they've evolved as a pair, especially with how they were able to make the Phoenix Championships late in the season. It's just quite astounding that they were able to get that done, and they were able to basically win on the biggest stage, well, not just the Phoenix Championship, the Chicago Open as well, which I definitely think speaks to high volumes of how both of these two are probably going to be the future of the AVP, let alone beach volleyball in general. They just got to play their cards right and stay healthy and keep themselves together. But those are my AVP projected award winners. Knowing my luck, I'm probably only going to get like 3 or 4 right at best. I mean, I'm definitely not going to be wrong about Team of the Year or Duo of the Year, and then I'm fairly certain Taylor Crabb is going to win 1 or 2 of these awards, as well as Kelly Cheng, and heaven knows if I'm going to be right about the others. So again, I picked 10 of these. I was basically forced to pick 10 of these, and basically I'm hoping I at least get 7 right. If I get 7 or more, then I consider that an accomplishment. So that is that for the AVP season right there. Jumping on into some other beach volleyball news, we actually had Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes, speaking of which, they won another international tournament, their 3rd tournament overall one, as they managed to win on the Beach Pro Tour, as they wound up winning the Colorado Springs tournament, as I guess this is called the Beach Pro Tour, as this was basically the final beach tournament of the calendar year or the season, as Kelly Cheng and Sara Hughes beat Betsy Flint and Julia Scholes. That's where Julia Scholes was. That's why she did not partake in the AVP tournament, just because she wanted to get onto the Beach Pro Tour, just because, like I said, she wanted to play internationally and hone her skills, just because she wanted to represent the U.S. well. She currently is on the U.S. beach volleyball team, but I digress on that. Anyway, Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng beat Betsy Flint and Julia Scholes in the final 21-17 and 21-11 in the Elite 16 event in Torquay, Australia. So I mentioned Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng winning gold for the U.S., but I also got to give honorable mention to Betsy Flint and Julia Scholes, who also represented the U.S. and made it all the way to the final. Overall, the U.S. had 3 out of 4 pairs in the semifinals, which is quite astounding. It really is quite amazing. And then also we had Kristen Nuss and Teran Rodriguez placing fourth in the event, as well as Paul Lottman and Miles Evans. So, but back to Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng. This is their third tournament they've won as a reunited pair. Let's recap what they've done in the past three tournaments. So the AVP Huntington Beach Open, they wound up winning that one in their first reunited tournament with one another, not dropping a set. They won another event in Torquay, Australia, last week without dropping a set. And now they won the Elite 16 event in Torquay, Australia yet again. So to recap, Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng, ever since reunited, have won 3 tournaments, 2 international, 1 AVP, and they have yet to drop a set ever since they've reunited with one another. They have yet to drop a match, let alone a set, ever since they've reunited. That really screams that this pair is just super special. Like I said, I really think that these two can be the future for U.S. beach volleyball. I really think that these two could be the next Alex Kleinman and April Ross. I'm not going to try to put them on a pedestal that much. I was going to say like Misty May and April Ross, but I think let's start a little somewhat smaller. I mean, April Ross and Alex Kleinman obviously won gold in the Olympics. And I think these two can win gold as well, because you also got to remember that these two wound up winning, I think 2 national championships at USC, and they really had a lot of success with the Trojans back in their day. And now they're back together, and I really think that these two can definitely be successful going down the road. I also got to give a shout-out to Julia Scholes and Betsy Flint. It's obviously not easy to face a very dominant buzzsaw of a pair such as Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng, but to get to the final is quite an accomplishment. And also, Kristen Nuss and Teran Rodriguez get a little bit of a shout-out as well, as they placed fourth, and I guess Paul Lottman and Miles Evans get a shout-out as well. So, once again, big congratulations to Sara Hughes and Kelly Cheng, friends of the show. I really think that the future is bright for them in terms of beach volleyball, whether it's professional, outside of the AVP, or whether it's in the AVP. These two are going to be something special. And Sara Hughes has had a whirlwind of a year. And I kind of feel bad for not picking her as, or projecting her as some of the possible, like, AVP award winners on the Bally Sports website. But this is why I don't make predictions when it comes to award winners, just because I'm fairly certain I'm going to be off by a million. But that is that for that little beach volleyball tidbit right there. So now let's jump on in to some NCAA women's volleyball news, as we'll eventually get to the NCAA women's volleyball recap of round 1 and round 2. But before the NCAA tournament started, we actually had some big volleyball news in terms of the NCAA women's volleyball side of things. I kind of need to do that, but I didn't feel like it. But there it is. So UCLA women's volleyball coach Mike Sealy has stepped down as head coach. So he's coached the Bruins for, 13 seasons, I want to say. He started out in 2011 when the Bruins wound up winning the NCAA tournament in his first year. And then they've basically been consistent for the most part. Unfortunately for Mike Sealy and UCLA, they failed to make the NCAA tournament, as they were one of the first 3 teams left out of the tournament, which really sucks. So Mike Sealy, the reason for his departure is because he wants to coach internationally, and he's not getting fired by any means. But I just think that this was kind of an unfortunate season, just because UCLA did not have the success that they had the previous year. Last season, UCLA made it all the way to the Sweet 16, losing to the eventual champion Wisconsin. This year, UCLA, without Mac May, who was basically their catalyst from last season, they just did not have the success that they had last year. They had a few not-so-good losses to, LMU, Utah State, both of which made the NCAA tournament, mind you. And then they also struggled a little bit in Pac-12 play. They were competitive in most of their matches. They took Oregon to 5 a couple times. Or actually, there was just the one time. They took Stanford to 5 one time. They took USC to 4 both times. They upset Washington State in the final week of the NCAA season. But unfortunately, that wasn't enough to get UCLA into the big dance. So I wish Mike Sealy the best. I was going to play you all my first ever interview with Mike Sealy just because I think that's going to forever be something I will treasure. But this was back when I was kind of the beat reporter for my school's school newspaper. But for time purposes, I'm not going to basically go back there. And basically, that was all the way back in 2019. Like, we're already in a new decade, so we're totally fine. But I will miss Mike Sealy. I wish him nothing but the best going forward. And I kind of wonder, who is the perfect person for the UCLA job? I'm really going to be interested in who gets the UCLA women's volleyball coaching job. It's got to be someone that really deserves it. I'm maybe thinking Joy Mackenzie Furbringer or Matt Furbringer, if they want it. That's a big if, just because their daughter is still currently playing high school volleyball, and I'm fairly certain the son, Joy and Nat have a son, Mateo, but that's kind of my first pick right there. You also maybe, hence the word maybe, can consider Laura Bird-Coon, though, I don't know, the former Texas A&M coach who had success with the Texas A&M back in 2019. I don't know about that one. Like, it all still remains to be seen. But time will tell when it comes to UCLA and their women's volleyball coaching search. So that's that for that little tidbit right there. But again, I do wish Mike Sealy the best going forward, and I'm certain this isn't the last we'll see of him. Also, I'm certain we'll see him on like the ESPN Plus or ESPNU broadcast when it comes to like men's volleyball. That's because I did see him last year when Long Beach State played Hawaii in men's volleyball, and he obviously was amazing. I'm pretty sure he was amazing on the broadcast. Matter of fact, he was amazing. So, at this time, I would normally go over all the transfers, but there's one problem. There's a lot of transfers that have hit the transfer portal, and for purposes of time constraints and for purposes of I don't want to like put you all to sleep, I'm not going to go over every transfer. I do, however, want to go over one big transfer that I caught with my eye. And both of these players come from the same school. So we have Anna Dixon, who is a graduate player, as well as Kaylee Cox, both entering the transfer portal. And that's big time right there, just because those two were studs for Missouri, and both of them play the same position. Well, Anna Dixon can play opposite as well, but they both play outside hitter. So Anna Dixon is a graduate player with 1 year left of eligibility, while Kaylee Cox is going to be a junior next year. So I imagine she has 2, maybe 3 years of eligibility left. So this is big time for Missouri, just because losing Kaylee Cox, well, Anna Dixon as well, was big right there. Obviously, losing Anna Dixon was big just because she was a senior this year. But losing Kaylee Cox is also big time right there, just because she was probably one of their bright spots in terms of underclassmen. She actually led the team in kills with 379, which, that's got to hurt if you're Missouri. And keep in mind, she is only a sophomore. Also, Anna Dixon left the team as she basically has 1 more year of eligibility left. I imagine she's just going to play as a grad student and just go to grad school there. So, for Anna Dixon, she has 1 more year of eligibility left. Whoever lands these two, if they're at the same school or not, they're going to get a big-time get right there. And I can only imagine which team lands one, if not both of these players. But I do wish these players the best. I really think that these two are going to be dynamic no matter where they go to. And for Missouri, I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy when it comes to this program. I really hope Missouri is able to rebound from this just because, well, Missouri's going to be very young next year. This year they were very young. They were young as it was, as they had mostly freshmen and sophomores. They had whatchamacallit. I think they had 1 graduate senior and 2 seniors. Basically 1 super senior and then 2 regular seniors. So the 1 senior basically has the option of of possibly getting the fifth-year option, the COVID year, while the graduate who was on Missouri, she's basically done with. Unless she has a sixth-year option, a.k.a. a redshirt year. But this Missouri team was mainly comprised of freshmen and sophomores. That's the scary thing. I know their future looks bright. This team will be something special in 2 seasons. I don't know if next season will be in the cards, but I think Missouri definitely has potential next year. I just think it could be a little bit of a rebuild, just because they're also going to get a new head coach. That's why I'm saying Missouri is going to be something special in 2 years. Now, obviously, the players have to stay, and Missouri has to hire the correct coach. But for me, Missouri next year could be in for a little bit of a rebuild season. However, I think their future definitely looks bright in a couple years, just because those freshmen and sophomores are going to eventually become juniors and seniors, and eventually Missouri could have the possibility of being a contender in the SEC. But they have to do everything right. They also have to make sure their players are happy. They have to build a great culture, and more importantly, they just have to make sure those players don't leave for some of the other SEC schools like Kentucky or Florida or Tennessee or whatnot. So overall for Missouri, it's just going to be a little bit of a work in progress next year, but I think they'll get through it. All right, that's going to basically do it for the volleyball news. Well, actually, we have one more bit of volleyball news to discuss. I'm sorry if I'm basically pushing back the NCAA women's volleyball tournament recap, but we had one more notable player hit the transfer portal today, as Temi Thomas Ilara has entered the transfer portal for Northwestern, as she has one more year of eligibility left. So she's going to be a graduate student, and she is in the transfer portal, and this is going to be quite something, just because Northwestern sadly did not make the NCAA tournament this year, and it's not because Northwestern was bad. Like, Northwestern had a good shot at making the NCAA tournament. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure this is just like a final year of college volleyball year. I'm not trying to twist things right here and there, but I really think that whoever lands Temi Thomas Ilara is going to get a beast of a player. And she was definitely, according to Emily Eman of the Big Ten Network, she was one of the more sought-after this is definitely going to be one of the sought-after transfers this offseason after finishing top 5 in the Big Ten in kills per set for the past 3 seasons. So I really think this is going to be something. Whoever lands her is basically going to get a dynamic player. And this was first announced courtesy of Lincoln R. Neal of Huskers Illustrated, which covers Nebraska volleyball and whatnot. So anyway, back to Temi Thomas Ilara. This is going to be quite something on whoever lands her in terms of the transfer portal. So again, this is kind of Black Monday, not just for like coaches, but for players that pop in and out of the transfer portal. So I really am going to be interested to see where she lands up or ends up. But I do wish her the best going forward. I think she's going to be something special come professionally. We'll see. All right, now that's going to do it for all the NCAA volleyball news in terms of transfers and coaching changes. So now let's get on into the NCAA tournament. So let us recap the first 2 rounds. And then we'll take a commercial break, and then we'll have the stat stuffers, and then my team of the week. And then we'll preview the Sweet 16 and beyond. So we'll go from upper left-hand bracket all the way down to lower right-hand bracket. So the first matchup we had was Texas sweeping Farley Dickinson. I don't need to say anything about that. So I'm not too surprised that Texas won. The one below it, I'm a little surprised of what happened. We had Georgia beating Towson in 4. Now, I was a little surprised at this little matchup right here. I thought Towson was really good. And then I realized Towson didn't really play some stiff competition outside of beating Pitt. And then they also lost to Elon, and they won their tournament, the CAA tournament, but unfortunately they got one and done by Georgia. Now, in the defense of Towson, Georgia played some darn stiff competition. They played Georgia Tech. They played in the vast SEC. And you got to remember, Georgia finished third in the SEC behind Kentucky and behind Florida. So there's no shame in losing to Georgia. I just was a little surprised Towson lost in the first round, just because Towson has some studs on that team. It's just that Georgia had some bigger studs. Below that matchup, we had Georgia Tech sweeping Wright State. I was a little surprised this was a sweep, but for me, Georgia Tech, with Julia Bergman, nothing was going to stop her. Below that matchup, we had Marquette sweeping Ball State. Now, Ball State, I don't think, was a bad team. They finished runner-up in the MAC tournament, but I kind of had a feeling Marquette was going to win this one. I kind of was hoping it wasn't going to be a sweep, but Marquette just has too much firepower. Below that matchup, we had Ohio State sweeping Tennessee State, which is no surprise. If they had lost in the first round, I would have probably thrown my phone out the wherever I was throwing it. And then right below the Ohio State-Tennessee State matchup was USC sweeping High Point. I'm also kind of not surprised at this matchup as well, just because USC is a good team. They weren't going to lose in the first round, especially with Skylar Fields. Come on. And I got to give a shout out to Adania Fa'umina, who took over for Mia Twiniga at center, as Mia was basically nursing an injury. So there was that right there. Below that matchup, we had Northern Iowa sweeping Florida State. Now, this one was the surpriser for me. I did not think Florida State was going to lose in the first round. Florida State has a lot of firepower on that team. I did not think Florida State was going to lose. But for Florida State, to lose in sweeping fashion, I'm a little disappointed by this. That's because everyone and their mothers was saying that this was Florida State's most offensively talented team in quite a while under their head coach. But I don't know how Florida State lost in 3. But I guess Northern Iowa is better than what their record indicate. Well, the record is good, but Florida State played some darn good competition. So I'm still boggled by that. And then lastly, for the upper left-hand corner, we had Minnesota sweeping Southeastern Louisiana. Also not surprised by this. By the way, the top 4 seeds of each region were the ones that hosted in the first 2 rounds. And then in the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, it's basically the higher seed hosts that one. So basically, if the 1 seed is still alive, they host the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. I don't know if I clearly clarified that, but if I didn't, I apologize. Anyway, to the lower left-hand bracket, we had San Diego beating Northern Colorado in 4. Now, I had a strange feeling, Northern Colorado, and some people were actually picking Northern Colorado in an upset. I understand that, but San Diego is just too good. They are so loaded. Now, if you asked my day 1 of the NCAA women's volleyball self about this matchup, maybe I'm picking Northern Colorado. But San Diego was not losing that one. They wound up winning in 4. It was a little bit of a troublesome match in the 4th set. But San Diego, they're on a mission, y'all. Sorry. And then below that matchup, we had Washington State sweeping UNLV. This one I did not expect, but it just goes to show the growth of Washington State. Remember, this is a Washington State team that finished 3rd in the Pac-12, right? And I really thought they had performed well at a high level. Unfortunately for Las Vegas fans, UNLV, unfortunately, will not be adding some hardware in terms of volleyball championships, but at least you still have the Las Vegas Raiders. Food for thought right there. Look on the bright side of things. Anyway, below that matchup, we had Western Kentucky sweeping Bowling Green. Not too surprised at this matchup, just because Western Kentucky has been great for the most part. I kind of want to give Bowling Green a chance, but Western Kentucky, they're not that bad. They've played some good competition, but not the most sound competition, and Bowling Green hasn't really fared against all that great competition. So, for Western Kentucky, this one was kind of obvious that they would win. And then below that little matchup, we had Kentucky sweeping Loyola of Chicago. Yeah, this one was kind of obvious of who was going to win as well. Just because Kentucky, while they're not the Kentucky from 2 seasons ago, they're still fairly good. Like, they're not going to lose in the first round. It's not like last year where they lost in the round of 32, but more on that later. Now, this one was the shocker of the year. This was the shocker of the first round. Auburn, one of the last 4 teams that made the NCAA tournament, they beat Creighton in 5. I'm going to come back to that one. Anyway, below that matchup, we had Houston outlasting South Dakota in 5. So Houston, they went up 2-0 in the match. South Dakota wins the third set. In the fourth set, South Dakota loses its top player. I believe it's Emily Junkie. That right there could have been the end for South Dakota. But South Dakota fought. They wound up winning the fourth set. Then the fifth set, they fell behind. They tied it up at 10-10. And then Houston closed out on a 5-1 run. And then that was that. I gotta give credit to South Dakota. They fought like heck after they lost Junkie. Unfortunately, Houston did not have any problems, as they basically said, let's stop playing like the Houston Texans, and let's start playing like the Houston Cougars women's volleyball team. I've probably pissed off a lot of Houston Texans fans right there. I'm sorry, y'all. Anyway, so below that matchup, we had LSU beating Hawaii in 4. This one I was a little surprised, but I also need to remember that LSU played some stiff competition in SEC play. Now, obviously, Hawaii has some big-time players like Riley Wagner and Amber Igide, and I've seen Hawaii play. They're well-coached. Robin Amo does an outstanding job as head coach, and she was named the Big West Conference Coach of the Year. I just did not expect for them to lose to LSU in the first round, because you got to remember, Hawaii beat Mississippi State in the first round last year. So I was thinking there was going to be some deja vu with Hawaii beating LSU. Unfortunately, that was not the case. Then, closing out the lower left-hand side of the bracket, we had Stanford beating Pepperdine in 4. Now, like I said, I had a feeling this was going to be a spirited matchup. Pepperdine was playing with house money. They dropped the first 2 sets, won the third set, and then Stanford just gave them the business in the fourth set. But I really like this Pepperdine team. I thought they played with a lot of toughness. Obviously, it was tough not having Rachel Aarons, who unfortunately had to put her mental health ahead of volleyball. But this team fought like heck in the Stanford matchup, and that's what I was impressed about. And I hope their future definitely looks bright, as they only lose like 3 players? Riley Patterson, Isabella Zayala, and not Nicklin Hames, Kaylee Hames, who is the sister of Nicklin. So Pepperdine's future looks bright, and I think this team has that potential for next season, especially with Emily Hellmuth. Going up to the top left-hand bracket, we had Wisconsin sweeping Quinnipiac. Not surprised. I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit, just because I got to recap the Creighton-Auburn match fully. Then we had TCU beating Washington in 4. Not too surprised that TCU would win, just because Washington, they just didn't have that it factor in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, losing Maddie Ensley was tough, but I thought they would at least go 5. But gotta give credit to TCU. This is a team that really came alive in Big 12 play, and I really was impressed by them. Below that matchup, we had UCF sweeping Yale. Kind of surprised, but not really, just because UCF has McKenna Melville. Then we had Penn State sweeping UMBC. Not surprised, because this is Penn State, and they have grown up so fast. The old saying goes, they grow up so fast. Below that matchup, we had Florida sweeping Florida A&M. We had Florida sweeping Florida A&M. I was about to say just kidding, but that's the matchup below that. Anyway, Below that matchup, we had Iowa State outlasting Florida Gulf Coast in 5. So, for those that remember last year, Florida Gulf Coast reverse swept Texas Tech. It was looking like it was going to be deja vu, as Florida Gulf Coast was down 0-2, won the next 2 sets, then Iowa State basically turned on the Jets and basically outlasted them in 5. Which is no surprise, just because I had Iowa State advancing to the round of 32, just because that team really did well in Big 12 play. They did crumble a little bit, just because they had a few losses here and there. I think they lost to, Kansas State? Either way, I'm not surprised Iowa State won. I just was surprised that they had to go 5. Anyway, we had BYU beating James Madison in straight sets, sweeping James Madison in straight sets. I am a complete fool for not knowing this stat. Under the watchful eye of Heather Olmstead, BYU has not lost an NCAA women's volleyball first-round matchup. If I had known that, I would not have picked James Madison to win this matchup. Oops. So, yeah, my bad. Sorry, BYU fans. Below that matchup, we had Pitt sweeping Colgate, not surprised. We had Nebraska below that matchup in the lower right-hand corner. We had Nebraska sweeping Delaware State, not surprised. We had Kansas sweeping Miami of Florida. So this was not surprising to me. I have no idea why Miami was a 7 seed. I don't understand. How did Kansas get paired with this matchup? How is Kansas not seeded altogether? I know they had their ups and downs in the season, and I also know they ran into a bit of a snag in Big 12 play, which included them getting reverse swept against Texas at home. But you really can't count out Kansas. I think the committee needs to stop on ranking Kansas. Put them as a ranked team, or at least put them against an 8 seed. Below that matchup, we had Arkansas sweeping Utah State. First NCAA tournament win since 2005 for Arkansas. Not surprised, because Arkansas was battle-tested. They had a couple good wins in Washington and Georgia Tech. Not surprised that they won this matchup. Then we had Oregon sweeping LMU below the Arkansas-Utah State matchup. Not surprised, because this is probably the hottest team that no one wants to face, especially at Matthew Knight Arena. Oregon, going into the tournament, had not lost at Matthew Knight Arena. Below that matchup, we had Baylor versus Stephen F. Austin. Not surprised that Baylor won this matchup. I mean, Baylor, they're young, but they still have a high-powered offense. And then below that matchup, we had Rice beating Colorado in 4. Not too surprised that matchup wasn't going to be a sweep, just because Colorado tied for 5th in the Pac-12, and they had some fairly decent wins over USC and then Washington. I knew they were going to give Rice some fits, but I knew Rice was going to pull out the dub in the end. And then below that matchup, we had Purdue outlasting Tennessee in 5. I knew this was going to be... I picked Tennessee to win this one, but I had a feeling Tennessee was going to give Purdue a battle. I also did not know this. Tennessee has never beaten Purdue in any sport. I'm sorry to Tennessee fans that have to listen to this, but I was unaware of this. If I had known that, I maybe would have picked Purdue. But I give credit to Tennessee. They really fought tooth and nail. And then the last matchup of the lower right-hand bracket, we had Louisville sweeping Samford. Louisville sweeping Samford. That's no surprise. All right, I got to recap this Creighton-Auburn matchup. So this matchup, I was very surprised that Auburn, one of the last 4 teams in, was able to win this matchup at Creighton, mind you. Creighton was the Big East Conference champion. They had played some darn good competition. They even got back Jayla Zimmerman somewhere down the season. And Auburn wound up beating them. First set, Creighton won it 25-21. It was looking like this was going to be expected. But then Auburn, credit to them, they fought back in the next 2 sets. They won it 25-21, 25-20. I was just thinking, whoa, this is not a last 4 in team. But then again, Auburn, they did have that stretch where they went 12-0, And then they ran into some trouble in the SEC, but they also had some wins over Georgia as well. But overall, I don't think anyone had this on their bingo card, unless you're an Auburn fan, but I digress. Then Creighton won the fourth set 25-16, and then the fifth set, Auburn got off to a good start, and they eventually won that one, and they eventually won the fifth set 15-11. I'm very surprised Auburn won this one. Like, it was one thing that Creighton lost in the second round, but to lose in the first round on your home court against the last four team in, that's surprising in a not-so-good way. I'm very surprised, to say the least. But, again, this is the NCAA tournament. So, Auburn in that match was led by Madison Shear, who had 17 kills, and she hit .302. Akasha Anderson had 15 kills, and she had 13 digs. And then Belle Zimmerman had 11 kills. And in terms of stats, Auburn outdug Creighton 74-69. This was the stat that Auburn got the better of in Creighton. Auburn outblocked Creighton 14 to a whopping 6. That was ugly right there. The good thing for Creighton is that they out-aced them 7-4, and they had fewer service errors than Auburn. But, again, those blocks, getting out-blocked 14-6, resulted in Creighton hitting only 166. Norris practically had to carry the team. She had 30 kills, 30 out of the 62 kills for Creighton, and then Ava Martin had 14 kills. And then the next kill leader after Martin, Kiana Schmidt, who had 8 kills. Other than Nora Sis, who hit 273, she also had 9 errors, by the way, and she took 77 swings. I don't think there was an efficient hitter on Creighton in this matchup, and that's concerning. The funny thing is that Creighton actually hit well in that fifth set. They had 9 kills to 2 hitting errors, and they hit 368. Problem was, Auburn had 11 kills on 2 hitting errors via 21 swings, and they hit 429. So, unfortunately for Creighton, I was a little surprised that they lost in the first round, to say the least. But to lose at home? Yikes, dude. I would imagine this team was a dark horse to possibly go to at least the Elite Eight, but man, that's a punch to the face. Anyway, second round. So, and also, believe it or not, Creighton was the only top 4 seed to not advance to the Sweet 16. Spoiler alert. Also, they were the only top 4 seed to not get out of the first round, so ouch. Anyway, second round recaps. Texas swept Georgia. Not too surprised. Marquette swept Georgia Tech. This one was a surprise. I did not think Marquette was going to sweep Georgia. I actually picked Georgia Tech to win this one just because I thought Georgia Tech was so much better. Georgia Tech has Julia freaking Bergman. They also have other players that were willing to contribute to the offense. I did not think Marquette was going to win this matchup, but Georgia Tech laid an egg. Well, or in this case, they ran out of buzz. So, I'm a little surprised that Marquette won, let alone swept. But more on them a little bit later. Below that matchup, we had Ohio State sweeping USC. Now, I was a complete fool for thinking USC was going to beat Ohio State. I don't know what I was thinking picking USC to beat Ohio State, when I know darn well Ohio State is way better than USC, and USC has struggled against stiff competition. Oops. So I apologize to Buckeye fans out there. I'm sorry if I picked against Ohio State. It wasn't because I'm a USC guy outside of volleyball. It's just that I thought USC was going to pull off some sort of crazy upset. And I thought Ohio State was still going to be in its funk, just because playing Tennessee State doesn't really, or sweeping Tennessee State when you're one of the more higher-seeded teams does not really think that you've snapped out of it. And you got to remember, Ohio State struggled when it came to the end of the regular season, but I guess when it comes to the postseason or the end of the regular season, it don't mean squat. And then we also had Minnesota sweeping Northern Iowa. No surprise there. I personally wanted to see Florida State, Minnesota, but Florida State laid an egg in that first matchups, or in the first round. So, yeah. Good effort by Northern Iowa, but unfortunately, Minnesota just shredded y'all like a cheese grater. Below that matchup, down into the lower left-hand corner, we had San Diego beating Washington State in 4. I had a feeling this was going to be at least 4-setter. San Diego did get by Washington State, but I gotta give credit to Washington State. They fought like heck in that matchup against San Diego. They did not make it easy on the Toreros. They've got a lot of talented players returning. They've got 5 seniors returning for next year. So I imagine the Cougars are going to be up there in terms of talent. So watch out for them. Also, we had Kentucky sweeping Western Kentucky. I thought this would have been a little bit better of a matchup. This was a bluegrass battle. And unfortunately, Kentucky kind of turned Western Kentucky black and blue as they just swept them. They just dominated them. I was a little surprised, but I also got to realize this isn't the same. This isn't the Kentucky from last year. This is Kentucky of this year, and they've moved past last year. Sorry. Below that matchup, we had Houston outlasting Auburn in 5. So this was a little not surprising just because Auburn was riding the highs from that big win over Creighton. They were up 2-1 in the match through 3 sets. Then Houston won the 4th set. And then Houston got off to a fast start in the 5th set. They didn't relinquish the lead. And they advanced to the Sweet 16. I want to say this is their first Sweet 16 appearance since 94. And this is their first 30-win season since the NCAA volleyball season since the NCAA adopted volleyball in 1981. So good for Houston. They did not have too many problems. Speaking of not too many problems, Stanford swept LSU, which I wasn't too surprised about. LSU did try to force a 4th set in set number 3, but then Stanford kind of turned off autopilot and turned on Stanford mode, which is not something good for LSU. Still a good season for LSU regardless. To the upper right-hand bracket, we had Wisconsin sweeping TCU. That's not surprising just because Wisconsin's the reigning NCAA champion. And, well, I give credit to TCU for beating the other UW. They were not going to beat this UW in Wisconsin. Below that matchup, we had Penn State beating UCF. Now, I thought Penn State wasn't going to win this matchup. I thought Penn State's youth and inexperience and having a new first-year head coach and facing McKenna Melville and some other top hitters on UCF was going to be the end of their season. Unfortunately for UCF, that was not the case, as Penn State really performed well. This looks nothing like a young team. This is an experienced team that is meshing well with one another, and they are responding well under Katie Schumacher-Cawley. Below that matchup, we had Florida sweeping Iowa State. Yeah, Florida wasn't having it when it came to the round of 32. They were not in the mood for going 5, so they brought out the shoe and they basically beat Iowa State with it, unfortunately. Derp. And then below that matchup, we had Pitt sweeping BYU. The first matchup went 4, but to Pitt's credit, they really performed well, and I didn't think BYU was going to get swept, but again, I think Pitt is very talented. They're very talented for starters. Second of all, I definitely think this is not the same BYU team from last year. And third, Pitt is just loaded all over the place. Like, I would not be surprised if they made it all the way to the Elite 8. I'm just going to say that right now. Then the lower right-hand corner, we had Nebraska beating Kansas in 4. I'm not too surprised by this, just because Kansas, they had aspirations of make it to the Sweet 16, but unfortunately they ran into the Devaney Center and they took on the host Nebraska. And that was pretty much that for them. I give credit to Kansas a whole lot. Part of us, the entire volleyball world, was hoping we would see Kansas in the Sweet 16. But Nebraska is way too stacked. Way too stacked. Whether it's underclassmen or upperclassmen, Nebraska is way too stacked for Kansas. I give Kansas a lot of credit, though. And then below that matchup, we had Oregon beating Arkansas in 4. So Oregon, as we all know, they had not lost at the Matthew Knight Arena. That trend continued as they beat Arkansas in 4. They did not have a good start. They lost the first set, and then they fell behind in set 3, 5-0. But then everyone realizes it doesn't matter how you start, it's how you finish, and Oregon finished strong. And then the fourth set, Oregon beat the brakes off of Arkansas 25-9. So basically it was a gentleman's sweep. And for Oregon, for them to finish the home slate a perfect 14-0, it's very impressive. Like I said on the Set Point Twitter account, many had tried, a few had come close, but no team, I repeat, no team beat Oregon at Matthew Knight Arena, which is darn right impressive. And then the last pair of matchups we had in the round of 32, we had Baylor outlasting Rice in 5. I called this one the Texas Tussle just because, well, it's two Texas teams facing one another. And I had a feeling this matchup was going to go 5. Rice obviously has a lot of talent on their team, but for Baylor, they have been in this position before. And I think that's kind of what aided them to getting past Rice in the round of 32. I don't think they have too many players from the Elite 8 or from the Final Four team back in 2019 and from last year's team. But I really think, and from the previous team before, which made the Sweet 16, but I definitely think Baylor is not to be underestimated. They have some talent, and it's young talent, but just like Penn State, they're growing up quickly. And then the last matchup we had below Baylor-Rice was Louisville sweeping Purdue. Purdue tried to force a fourth set in set 3, but Louisville just turned out the lights and said, party's over. And this was not surprising just because Louisville is just a darn good team. Claire Chaussee is the truth. She is her. All right, that is going to do it for the first 2 rounds in terms of the recap. I know I kind of went a little longer than this, but it's all good. So we're going to take one little commercial break. When we come back, I got to give out my NCAA Women's Volleyball Team of the Week award from the first week of the NCAA tournament. And I got to go over the stat stuffers. And we've got the recap of the Sweet 16 to go over. So keep it locked here. You're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. We'll be right back after this.
What is going on, everybody? My name is Harrison Glazer, and we're coming at you from the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. I cover the Jets, the Islanders, the Nets, and the Yankees.
This is Pierre Moss, and I cover the Mets, Knicks, Rangers, and the Giants.
Our show is live every Wednesday through Spreaker and a bunch of other ways to get our content. Again, we're the Show That Never Sleeps podcast. We talk about all those New York sports. It's a lot of fun. We get into all of it. Please tune in. Again, that's Wednesdays at 6 p.m.
And we look forward to having you guys right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, ladies and sinners. Hello, sports fans around the world. Hello, IE Sports family. This is Cale Henderson, the host of IE Vegas, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio. If you folks are interested in sports in the Vegas area, if you're wanting to have a blast for 1 hour, every Tuesday night from 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, This is a show built for the Vegas sports fans, where we feature the Las Vegas Raiders, the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the Las Vegas Aces, and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada Rebels. Hopefully, fingers crossed, MLB team coming soon. Either way, if you folks are looking to have a blast for 1 hour each and every week, tune in Tuesday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you folks are interested in Vegas sports news, go to our Twitter, at SinCities_IESR, and you can speak with me, the host, Cale Henderson, at Cale_Henderson on Twitter. At any time, be happy to reply. Always want to reach out to our fans. Again, the Sin City Sports Show, presented by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Sports fans, do you like teams that are tough, cities that are tougher, and fan bases that are passionate about their teams? How about teams that are historic and stadiums that are iconic? Then you belong in Chicago, and you need to check out Chi-Town Weekly. Join me, Adam Kernan, every week as we keep up with all things Chicago sports. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Cubs, White Sox. We'll cover them all, plus more. The Windy City is always buzzing, and we'll keep you up on all the big games and major stories. So tune in to Chi-Town Weekly every week right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Back with segment number 2 of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that sports. Definitely check out all of our amazing shows, such as The Show That Never Sleeps with Pierre Moss and Harrison Glazer, as well as Sin City Sports with Cale Henderson. And Adam Carnick's show, Chi-Town Weekly, comes on 1 hour before Set Point goes on primarily. So definitely check out all of our amazing shows on IE Sports Radio. And also, if you haven't been on the IE Sports Radio website, definitely do so. We have lots of IE Sports Radio merchandise, such as sweaters, t-shirts, tank tops, even though we're in the winter. And we have Christmas ornaments for your Christmas tree. With all that said and done, let's get on into the second segment of Set Point. So, gotta go over the team of the week from the first week of the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament. So that honor belongs to Marquette. Now, I was thinking of giving it to a few other teams, but you also got to remember, Marquette, while beating Ball State wasn't the biggest accomplishment since they were one of the last 4 teams in, them beating Georgia Tech was kind of a big deal, just because Marquette was actually ranked number 16 in the most recent AVCA coaches poll from last week. And then Georgia Tech, on the other hand, was ranked number 13. So I thought that was a big-time win right there. It kind of makes me wonder, how did Marquette get a 4? It kind of makes me wonder, how did Georgia Tech get a 5 seed, and how did Marquette get a 4 seed? But I guess it now makes sense just because Marquette, they really showed their talent, and they showed why they were a 4 seed. At first, I thought Georgia Tech was the 4 seed and Marquette was the 5 seed, but beyond further review, Marquette was indeed the 4 seed. And it's not easy to sweep Georgia Tech because that team is good with the amount of talent that they have. Unfortunately for Georgia Tech, they just fell short, which sadly ended the college volleyball career of Julia Bergman, but she's going to do great things internationally. But for Marquette, they were able to sweep Georgia Tech, which was not an easy feat, as I gave them the honor. The honorable mentions that I had were Auburn for upsetting Creighton in round 1 and narrowly losing to Houston in 5. Now, if they had beaten Houston and Creighton, I would have given Auburn that honor in a heartbeat. No doubt about it. No debate. Nothing more, nothing less. Another honorable mention that I had was Houston for being the only non-4 seed to advance to the Sweet 16. Yes, Houston is the only top 4 seed to advance to the round of 16, which I think is very impressive. And I'm going to eat a lot of crow here. I said I think it was like 8 episodes ago, that I said Houston will go no farther than round 1 probably, depending on where they're based on in their region. In my defense, I said it all depends on where Houston's going to go, on how far Houston goes in terms of their region. But I said that Houston wasn't going to go any farther than the second round. I will own up to that. I own up to what I said, and I apologize, Houston fans, for saying that. I definitely think Houston is a talented team. The fact that they went 5 in both their rounds is quite astounding, and I give them honorable mention just because it's not easy to go 5 in both rounds of the NCAA tournament. And in the 5th set, all bets are off. Especially since South Dakota only came in with 3 losses. And then Auburn, like I said, they were riding the highest of highs from that amazing win over Creighton. So for Houston, they were also an honorable mention for Team of the Week. And then I also picked Penn State for an honorable mention as Team of the Week, just because obviously they swept UMBC, which was expected. But them beating UCF, I did not predict. I thought UCF was going to get the better of them just because, again, Penn State was young, inexperienced, and obviously McKenna Melville, how were they going to stop her? But Penn State was able to rise to the occasion, and they really came up big at Rec Hall. So I gave Penn State the honorable mention, but my team of the week this week is Marquette for sweeping Ball State 25-20, 25-17, and 25-17 in round 1, and sweeping Georgia Tech 25-23, 25-20, and 25-19. So that's why I gave Marquette team of the week, just because that win over Georgia Tech was big. It was not just a win, it was a sweep. So I definitely got to tip my cap to Marquette, as they are my NCAA Women's Volleyball Team of the Week from the first round. Now we got to get into some stat stuffers and notable numbers. So Bella D'Amico finished this season with 1,000 plus assists for Georgia Tech, which I thought was quite impressive, just in one season alone. I am very impressed by her. Also, in terms of milestones, we had CeCe McGraw of Minnesota becoming the 3rd player in Minnesota history to surpass 1,900 career digs. The crazy part is that her season continues, as I imagine Minnesota will have at least one more match, as they could get past Ohio State, but we'll save that for later. Also, in terms of stat stuffers, and speaking of players who surpassed a certain number of digs, we have Kelsey Knudsen of BYU surpassing 1,000 career digs, which I think is impressive right there for her. So, good job on her part. Then we had Carly Basham of Washington State surpassing 1,000 digs, as she becomes only the 14th player in program history to do so. Then we have my favorite statistic, Rachel Fairbanks of Pitt becoming the first player in Pitt history to record a triple-double, as she posted 10 kills, 28 assists, and 3 digs. But gotta keep in mind, that matchup against BYU where she posted the triple-double, that wasn't the triple-double wasn't the impressive part. The triple-double that was posted in 3 sets, yes, 3 sets, was the impressive part. The fact that she was able to do so in only 3 sets without side-out scoring is very impressive. So this was probably my favorite statistic right there. So good job to Rachel Fairbanks. Then we had Ella Larkin moving into 7th all-time in digs at LSU, having registered 414 plus digs in a season, as she is only one of 2 players to do so. So good job to Ella Larkin for accomplishing that feat. All right, so that is that for all your stat stuffers and notables. I'm actually going to save some of the milestones. I kind of already talked about them in my recap of the NCAA first and second round, but I'm going to save some of the milestones for some of the teams for my NCAA women's volleyball team superlatives. You know, kind of like best dressed, best all around, most spirited, best smile. You get that. You know what I mean. So now we're going to preview the Sweet 16 of the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament, and then I'll send you all on your way. So the first matchup we have is Texas versus Marquette. So keep in mind, every 1 seed that is made it here, which, they're all 1 seeds advanced. The only non-top 4 seed that didn't advance was Creighton, but I digress. So for Texas, they were able to... they faced Marquette in the Sweet 16. This is going to be quite the uphill climb for Marquette. They were able to take down one powerhouse hitter in Julia Bergman in Georgia Tech. Can they do so against Texas? Texas is going to be so difficult to beat just because they are just stacked all over the place, man. Holy moly. They have Maddie Skinner. They have Logan Eggleston. They have Asia O'Neal. It's just... I don't know how they're probably going to, win this matchup. But you never can count out Marquette. Marquette has a solid team. They obviously have some good hitters, but I don't know if they're going to keep up with Texas. You got to do a lot in order to take down Texas. Got to ask Iowa State. And below the Texas-Marquette matchup is Ohio State versus Minnesota. This is going to be a great matchup right here. So, a couple weeks ago, Minnesota beat Ohio State in 4. And my thing for Ohio State is, if they want to really prove that they have moved on from the horrible last 2 weeks of the regular season, this is their moment to shine. Now, again, I am eating lots of crow just because I thought they were going to get upset by USC. But, and like I said, the USC pick wasn't a homer pick. It was just, I thought we were going to see some NCAA tournament madness. But for the most part, every top 4 seed, every top 4 seed has advanced. For Ohio State, this is their moment to prove why they were one of the favorites, and early favorites for that matter. And this is also Minnesota's chance to basically keep the Hugh McCutcheon train going. Just because, like I said, this is Hugh McCutcheon's last season as head coach before he takes over other duties at Minnesota. Probably athletic duties. Athletic director duties. So, obviously Minnesota wants to send him out on top. And here's the interesting thing about the Texas regional. Those 2 matchups are actually going to be played on ESPN2. Every other regional matchup is going to be played on ESPNU, and then the regional finals are going to be on ESPNU, which I think is absolutely stupid, but more on that later. Anyway, going over to the Stanford regional, we have San Diego versus Kentucky. I really think Kentucky is much better than what I originally thought. I mean, Kentucky has not really had the best of seasons. Obviously, they had to split the SEC crown. They had a little trouble in non-conference play. But I think they've really developed and they've evolved ever since that loss to Texas A&M, which I thought was a hideous loss. Ugh. So for San Diego, it's a lot of pressure just because now, yes, they are still in California. No, they are not in San Diego anymore. They have to contend with a experienced NCAA tournament team, let alone a past NCAA champion in this decade. So for San Diego, I think their work's going to be cut out for them. But considering they got past a scrappy little matchup against Northern Colorado and a very tough match, well, not very tough, but a other scrappy little matchup against Washington State, I think San Diego might be ready. My thing is that they cannot underestimate Kentucky. This Kentucky team lost in the round of 32, and they want to redeem themselves. They want to prove that last year was a little bit of a fluke, and they want to earn some more hardware. And below the San Diego-Kentucky matchup is Houston versus Stanford. Houston, you have liftoff into the Sweet 16. They're playing with house money now. I would not be surprised if Houston was going to make it a battle against Stanford. I'm not going to say Stanford is not going to win this matchup. I think Stanford is most likely going to win this matchup. I don't think they're going to sweep them, though. I think Stanford definitely has their ups and downs, But I think Houston is riding a huge wave of momentum, and they've got nothing left to lose. They are the lowest seed of all of the remaining teams in the NCAA tournament. And also, they're playing a Stanford team, which is indeed good at home, but they're certainly not perfect, that's for sure. So for Houston, they're making history already, having, like I said, this is their first Sweet 16 appearance since 94, I want to say. And it's their first 30-win season in probably team history ever since the NCAA adopted women's volleyball. But for Houston, they have nothing left to lose. They're playing with house money here, and I would not be surprised if they gave Stanford some fits. It's just that Kendall Kipp is just that good. She is her for Stanford. And then going up to the upper right corner, or the Wisconsin regional, we have Wisconsin versus Penn State, another Big Ten Sweet 16 matchup. So Penn State took Wisconsin to 5 the last time these two teams played, but that was at Rec Hall. This time around, it's going to be back at Wisconsin, and for me, I don't think this is going to be anywhere easy for Wisconsin. I really think Wisconsin is going to have their work cut out for them, just because that young little Penn State team that has been labeled as inexperienced with a first-year head coach, that team has grown up. That Penn State team is definitely something special this year. And I think Kashana Williams is her. I am not just saying that just because I covered her back a couple seasons ago, at Long Beach State. But I'm saying that just because Kashana Williams, she is pretty much, I wouldn't say she's the backbone of the offense, just because they also have Allie Holland. But I think she has done really well in terms of offensive stats. She's probably done other things great for Penn State as well, and she has fit really well. She's fit like a glove at Penn State. So that's the Wisconsin regional right there. So closing out the Louisville regional, we have Nebraska versus Oregon. The biggest mistake for Nebraska would be to think that this one's going to be a cakewalk. Oregon is probably the team that no one wants to face. I think Oregon is probably, they're currently the hottest, okay, well, they're one of the hotter teams out there, as San Diego and Wisconsin probably eclipse them, but Oregon is crazy hot. Now, for Oregon, they have to play at the Bob Devaney Center. That's going to be tough. It's not going to be like playing at Matthew Knight Arena. They are going to be facing a lot of spirited Nebraska fans, and it's going to be pretty tough to win there. But for Oregon, they have a good shot. Brooke Nineveller has been her for Oregon. Mimi Collier has been probably one of the best freshmen, if not the best freshman, in the NCAA women's volleyball season this year. So for Oregon, they do have a little bit of their work cut out, but don't be surprised if Brooke Nineveller and Mimi Collier both go off. And then closing out the Louisville regional is Louisville versus Baylor. While I think Baylor is no match for Louisville, I just don't think that they're to be underestimated. I think Baylor is on a mission, and like Houston, they're playing with house money here. I really think them, Marquette, and Houston are playing with house money here. And same can be said for Penn State. And they don't have much to lose, considering, again, they're one of the few lower seeds in the tournament. And some people didn't even have them projected to get past the round of 32, but look at them now. Especially with losing Yassiana Presley to graduation, as well as some of their other players to graduation. But I think they have a lot of good players on their team. Mallory Talbert and the McGee sisters come to mind. Lauren Harrison and Riley Simpson also come to mind. I think Baylor could be a sneaky good team against this Louisville matchup. But Claire Chaussee is on another level. I'm not going to say is her, but she is just on another level. So that is basically my little preview of the Sweet 16 of the NCAA Women's Volleyball Tournament. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this week's episode of Set Point. It is time to drop the beat, as I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you everyone for tuning in to Set Point. I really do appreciate you all tuning in. If you listen live, I appreciate you. If you listen on the playback, I appreciate you. If you listen at work, I appreciate you. If you listen at any time, any place, anywhere, I appreciate you. Shout out to Larry B, Adam Karnick, Mike Pat, and that's pretty much it. And probably Patty Bax for listening live on Spreaker. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio. This is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have a great rest of the weekend. Enjoy the volleyball action. Remember, ESPN2 is televising the regionals or the regional semifinals. And I will see you Friday for the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!